Welcome to my review of Straight Outta Compton, directed by F. Gary Gray, a biopic on the formation of the revolutionary hip-hop group N.W.A. from the tough streets of Compton, California. Now, if you're somebody who's ever watched any of my best of lists, especially 2014, where I had Whiplash as my number 1 and Inside Llewyn Davis as my number 2, then you would know that I am somebody who really loves music, or at least you could kind of guess that I'm somebody who really loves music. Even though I'm not somebody who creates music, I'm somebody who does indeed love music, and I love movies that incorporate music. Movies like Whiplash, Inside Llewyn Davis, the Martin Scorsese films like Goodfellas, The Wolf of Wall Street, The Departed, Boogie Nights, the Paul Thomas Anderson film, and there are others as well. I'm somebody who has a fairly eclectic taste in music, and although I might not be somebody who has a full-fledged album of an artist that falls into a certain category of music that I'm not all too familiar with, that doesn't mean that I can't listen to the music, as long as there's something soulful about it, and not appreciate it. As for hip-hop, I don't consider myself to be a huge hip-hop head, but I am somebody who does enjoy hip-hop artists such as Kendrick Lamar, and I know some people might hate me for this, but I actually am a huge Kanye West fan. Personally, I don't believe all the shit that he says. I think it's all a big publicity stunt, but that's just me. Then, of course, there's Dr. Dre. Now, I don't own any of the N.W.A. albums, but I do own The Chronic 2001, and his newest album that came out the other day, Compton, which is pretty damn good. And being a moderate Dr. Dre fan, I was quite excited to see how this film was going to be. And like I said earlier, it is directed by F. Gary Gray, who directed Friday, of course starring Ice Cube. Really good film in my opinion. But as for Straight Outta Compton, this film really impressed me in ways that I didn't quite expect. As I said earlier, I'm a huge fan of movies that utilize music. And the first half of this film, with the use of music, the way it sets up its atmosphere, it is so energetic. And it had me smiling throughout the entire first half of the film. This film has great use of its great soundtrack, and this film kind of reminded me of a film that I did mention earlier. It's one of my all-time favorite films, and that is Boogie Nights, and the way it uses its soundtrack. And there's one shot that stuck out to me towards the beginning of the film, and it's where these kids are riding these dirt bikes, and they're all popping wheelies. And you have Just Another Day in Compton from the new Dr. Dre album. It kind of reminded me of something that you would see in a music video. And I must say that the acting from everyone, excluding one person, which I'll get to a little later, he has a cameo in the film, everyone is fantastic. Especially Jason Mitchell, who plays Eazy-E, and Paul Giamatti, who plays Jerry Heller, N.W.A.'s manager. And they really are something to watch. There's this one scene with Jason Mitchell. In case you do not know the history, I'm not going to tell you what it is of what's going on here, but it had me tearing up just a little bit. It really got to me. And if you're somebody who's familiar with the relationship between N.W.A. and Jerry Heller, then you would know, or at least from my understanding, that Jerry Heller was a pretty shady guy. And he's kind of depicted that way in the film, but at the same time, he's not depicted as a clear-cut villain. Because in the movie, you do get a sense that he actually does care for these guys in his own way. And that is something that I really did appreciate because it does give the character some dimension. As for some other noteworthy performances and characters, there is Corey Hawkins, who plays Dr. Dre. And he does kind of look like Dr. Dre in his own way, although I think his eyelashes were a little too thick. I bought him as Dr. Dre. And, of course, there's Osei Jackson Jr., who's playing his father. In Osei Jackson Jr., he's got all of Ice Cube's mannerisms, but I guess, then again, it'd be hard, not to, because that's Ice Cube's son. But he does a great job as well. I think he proved himself to be a pretty damn good actor in this movie. And then there's R. Marcus Taylor, who plays Suge Knight, the co-founder of Death Row Records, along with Dr. Dre. And going into the film, I did not know much about Suge Knight, but coming out, I do know that he's somebody that you do not want to fuck with, because he is ruthless. He's basically a black Tony Soprano. He's a true gangster. Notice I didn't say gangsta, I said gangster, like the Martin Scorsese type. And judging from a short clip that I saw him on the Jimmy Kimmel Show before recording this, I think the movie portrays him quite accurately. And another thing that I want to mention is the relevancy of this film. And a lot of people have been saying that, how this film is relevant to the events that have been going on as of lately in America. And I agree with these people wholeheartedly. What I find sad is that the injustice that is depicted in this film took place 20 plus years ago, and yet this shit is still happening. But I guess if there is any good news is that this stuff has never been more evident. So in other words, it's really difficult to escape it now. So maybe there could be some kind of progress in the future. But then again, hell, it did just take us over 100 years to figure out that that stupid flag, the Confederate flag, is kind of on the racist side. They always want to say, oh, it's heritage, not hate. I don't claim to be more intelligent than anybody. No, I don't. I really, really don't. I don't claim to be any smarter than anybody else, because I'm not. But it's pretty simple. Do a Google search and you'd see why that flag is kind of racist. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this review, I found the first half of the film to be better, or at least more energetic, than the second half. And some of the reasons why I found the first half to be more energetic than the second half is because of how musical the first half was, whether that be just the music from the 1980s or the music from N.W.A. And two, the first half of the film focuses more on the characters' plural enthusiasm for music, and it's incredibly infectious. One thing that I do want to mention before I get back to the music is the camaraderie between Eazy-E, Dr. Dre, and Ice Cube. And you can really tell that these guys genuinely love one another, and they are true brothers, and that is especially infectious. Unlike so many, quote, hip-hop artists today that only rap about booty-shaking hoes, money, and drugs, these guys don't rap about that. These guys actually rap about things that matter. And for them, it's kind of a healing process. It's their way of letting their thoughts and emotions out, and it's also their way of letting people that did not grow up in a place such as Compton, it's their way of letting people such as myself kind of get a little bit of an insight as to what it's like to live in such a harsh environment. But as for the second half, it loses some of that momentum, and it starts to focus more on the money versus the music and versus their friendship, because that's when the group kind of starts to break apart. However, do not misinterpret me, because I still did very much enjoy the second half. I was still very much enthralled throughout the entire film. Plus, given the mood of the film's characters, it only makes sense for the second half of the film to take on a more darker tone. Now, there is a small gripe that I have with this film, and it is a cameo. And it's an actor playing Snoop Dogg. The problem is that the actor they got to play Snoop Dogg looks absolutely nothing like Snoop Dogg. And when he goes to talk, it kind of sounds more like a parody than Snoop Dogg. It didn't really work for me. As for any other problems that I have with the film, and this is probably the biggest one, and I'm kind of using that word loosely because it's not like a huge problem or anything, it's just something that was the biggest one that I saw in the film, and that is it kind of jumps around a little too much for my particular taste. And I understand that there's a whole slew of material that they're trying to cover, so I can't really fault the film too much for doing that, because it's just trying to cover really the big moments, and that I understand. Overall, Straight Outta Compton is a great film for anybody who appreciates music, especially if you're somebody who loves hip-hop. Even if you're not a big N.W.A. fan and you like hip-hop, which that's kind of unheard of, but if you do exist, then I think you enjoy this film as well. This is my second favorite film of the year so far. This is a tremendous film. I highly recommend it, and I'm going to give it a low 4.5 out of 5. And if you're somebody who has seen this film, let me know your thoughts on it. Go check this film out. It's definitely worth your time. And as always, I'm Colin Kirkland, and thank you so much for watching.